Well, it turns out I think that I'm in a little bit of trouble with one of my friends. I had a good friend of mine, come to me the other day, and he said, in a spirit of admonishment, he was talking to me. He said, you have a lot of good things to say, and your philosophy seems to promote a lot of good things, but truthfully, he said, you're so esoteric and over complexified with your philosophical position that it's very difficult for me or anyone else to really understand what it means. Well, at first, this hurt my feelings. Deeply inside, I was in a severe amount of pain, and it was very emotional, and I struggled with deep-seated, positions of sorrow, and I didn't know what to do at first, but time is the great healer, and so after about a few days, I was sitting on my recliner, and then I took that admonishment and that reproof, and I began to say to myself, well, what can I do to overcome this severe dissemination of overcomplexification? And then it came to me. It was like a tsunami of wisdom coming from one side and like a hurricane of understanding from another. And it just collided right there in my recliner, in my mind. And it was like some massive nexus, a crash of all of this information where it began to just emanate with incredible clarity. And then I knew what I had to do. I had to disseminate this new nexus of simplicity in the confines of understanding and wisdom. And this would solve the problem. So that is why I'm making this video, is to disseminate a nexus of simplicity. Now, before I do that, it's very important. I've been wanting to do this in several ways, I guess, for a while, but I need to engage first in a very brief prerequisite, and then I will do great diligence. I'll do due diligence in disseminating the nexus of simplicity. The prerequisite is this: if by chance you work in government or in the confines of law enforcement, please know with all sincerity that my philosophy, blind liberalism, is benign in the political context. And let me explain what I mean by that. I have no desire to be political with my philosophy. I have no desire to get political with it at all. I actually detest politics and could give a rip about the entire political structure as we know it. It's not that I, am angry or upset, at the political status quo or anything, but I just don't agree with so many, are the myriad of unethical positions that so many politicians and parties and factions all take. So I just don't like politics. This philosophy, blind liberalism, is strictly philosophical. It is full of artistic expression. It is simply me promoting, from the ethical substrate of natural rights theory, what is ethical and what is just. And it's measuring almost any kind of an issue or measuring any kind of position out there against it. What is ethical? What should be? And that is really what this philosophy is about. It's an educational campaign. It is an educational campaign of philosophy and artistic expression. And so please understand and know that I don't ever tell anyone to disobey the law. That is not what this philosophy is about. This philosophy is not addressing any kind of current legal structure or any kind of compulsory organized political means, government, or government agencies. It is instead ethics. Ethics that congeal from natural rights theory. That is the heart and soul of everything that I do with any kind of expression or communication or conveyance that I do. So please understand and know that this is not an organized political rebuttal to the compulsory status quo. I try to do everything that I can to obey all the law. Thousands of laws are created every year. I possibly can't know all of them. Who can? But I do respect our legal structure from a deontological, strategic position. It's dangerous not to. And so therefore, know that I am in a mode of compliance. Also know that I do everything that I can anytime anyone tries to approach me in any kind of a legal capacity. I tell them I'm highly unqualified to give them any advice. I don't tell anyone to break the law. I do everything I can to obey the law. I try to do everything that you require me in terms of taxation. And that is exactly the approach that I communicate to everyone else as well. Just obey the law. Now, if someone asks me, what is ethical? What is ethical according to natural rights theory? Then that's where I get extremely, in other words, I go to extreme detail to delineate an ethical position according to natural rights theory. So, and let me just say also, if you're an individual and you are surfing the great expanse of the massive interweb, and you stumble upon my meager little site or anything that I produce, please understand and know that I am not giving out any kind of legal information. I am instead communicating a philosophic position regarding ethics that come from natural rights theory. So it's totally philosophic and artistic expression. Therefore, do not use any kind of content coming from me in a legal capacity. All right, now we got that out of the way. So there was my little brief prerequisite. Sorry, but got to do these things. But now I want to disseminate the Nexus of Simplicity. Now, as I was in my recliner and I came up with this Nexus of Simplicity, I began to, conceptualize what would be the best way to communicate it. And I thought, well, the best way to communicate it would be to tell you a very small, surreal, allegorical kind of story. Very short. But I think this story will then help you understand what my philosophy is really all about. And also, at the end of the story, I'm also going to give you a small riddle. Now, if you can understand this story, and if you can understand this riddle, then you are going to be 1,000% enlightened with the Nexus of Simplicity concerning my philosophy, which is called blind liberalism. So it's really easy. It's just about this little story and this little riddle. After you get that, it's all over. Enlightenment will be a total saturated and baptized impartation in the mind. All right. There was once a man who stood on a vantage point, and he was able to see across an expanse through time. And when he looked across this expanse, he noticed that there were a lot of people through the ages that would start to draw lines across the terrain and in various places. And he began to ask himself some questions. He says, who should be drawing the lines? Who should be drawing lines of morality upon the right side, and who should be drawing lines upon the left side of it? And who should be drawing circles of safety across the whole? Who really is ethically endowed to possess the power to delineate the artistry of lines when you're dealing with morality, fairness, and safety? And then he looked across the expanse and he noticed that there was this vile-looking demon, very similar to what a snake would look like, but some sort of a mutation from a human. And he was like this demon. And he was vile. He had fangs, and he was a very evil creature. And he built this contraption, and it had all of these pipes and wheels and cogs. And this machine, it was just this rattle-trap type of machine. And as he would get it to go and fire off, it would just have these plumes of this very toxic green and black looking smoke that would come off of it. And when the smoke would go up into the air, it would start to form a rescue signal for the naive. For every person who has fallen unfair, to every person who lives in fear, and for every person that demands society to become ambiguously moral. And they're drawn to this rescue signal, for it was this demon and his contraption that would offer a solve for all three. So as he would move his contraption across the terrain, he would move his contraption where all the lines were always attempted to be drawn. And he would replace those lines with a ditch. For his contraption would secrete this concoction, this toxic bile, that would just go into the ground, and it would erode and destroy the terrain. And it would not only erase any decent attempts at the lines, but it would just start creating all of these ditches and moats. And then all of a sudden they would be filled with all of this wretched, terrible sewage that had this terrible stench. And through time, these moats sometimes would start to connect together. And sometimes these moats would get extremely wide and very deep. And eventually, through time, one of these channels would get deep enough to where you would start seeing a bubbling that would start to happen in various places in this wretched stench and sewage. You would start to see these mutated creatures of the deep with these very powerful fins swirling around in this sewage water. And then there would be all of these spider-like creatures that would start to come up out of the sewage, and they would start crawling up on the banks. And then there would be all of these snakes that would just infest banks on almost in every side with many of the spiders. And then on the right side of the channel, there would be this big perch, this platform. And there would be this vile, sinister creature holding out a charm of ambiguous morality. And the charm was given to him by all of those in society who were the church. And then on the left side, there was another perch. And there was another man that was speaking all manner of fairness. And he held out a charm, and that was given to him, to all people who had fallen unfair. And then there was this very large bridge. And on this bridge, there were these vile creatures. There were mutations, but they were also alchemists. And they were like mad scientists. And they were like collecting a toll. And they were the toll masters for anybody to cross. They had stolen the mint, and they had stolen the exchange. But the most dreadful part of this scene was all of these areas where the bubbling was taking place came together, and there started to be a massive amount of bubbles. And then out of this sewage, where all the bubbles was the thickest, started to be raised up a creature, a formidable, terrible creature, full of scales and teeth, a massive tail. And at first you couldn't realize how large it really was until it started to lift itself up. And it began to tower up in the air. Its head would literally reach the clouds. And it had the ability to subdue all things and trample it down till it was almost nothing. And it gained its strength and its power by all those who were afraid, by all of those who had fallen unfair, and by all those who demanded society to be ambiguously moral. All right, that is my story. Now I'm going to give you a riddle. What is positive and negative? Objectively. And what restrains a thing in totality, but liberates another thing ethically? All right, see, I told you this would happen. I told you that as soon as I would disseminate this, that your mind would just be baptized with almost complete, unadulterated clarity. Now you understand my philosophy to an acclimated science. Well, I guess now that I have communicated or extrapolated the Nexus of Simplicity, my job is done. So anyway, I appreciate you listening. Thanks.